Ever marvel at those magnificent Roman statues of Jupiter, Mars, and Venus? See them as grand marble figures, symbols of power and beauty? But what if I told you the Romans' relationship with their gods was far more primal, far more terrifying, and often far bloodier than we imagine? Forget the serene temples and poetic myths for a moment. We're about to journey into the shadows of the Roman Empire to uncover the rituals and sacrifices that would make even a hardened legionary tremble. This is the story of gods who didn't just want prayers. They demanded blood. Before we dive into the truly dark stuff, let's get one thing straight. Sacrifice was the absolute cornerstone of Roman religion. It wasn't just an occasional event. It was the main way Romans communicated with the divine. The basic idea was, do you te I give so that you may give. You offer something valuable to a god, and in return you hope for favor, whether it's a good harvest, victory in battle, or recovery from an illness. For everyday offerings, this could be simple things like a libation of wine poured onto an altar, a cake of spelt flour, or a garland of flowers. These were common, almost daily acts. But when the stakes were high, so was the price. The most common form of blood sacrifice involved animals. The Romans were meticulous about this. The type of animal had to be perfect. For Jupiter, you'd offer a white bull. For Mars, a bull or a ram. For Ceres, the goddess of agriculture, a sow. The animal had to be physically flawless, and its gender often had to match the gender of the deity. Before the ritual, the animal was decorated with ribbons, and its horns might be gilded. It was led in a solemn procession to the altar, which was usually located outside the temple. The key was that the animal had to appear to go willingly. A struggling animal was a terrible omen, a sign the gods were rejecting the offering. Priests would sometimes whisper into the animal's ear or offer it food to make it nod its head, which was interpreted as consent. Once at the altar, a priest would dedicate the animal to the god with a prayer. Then came the brutal part. A special attendant, the victimarius, would stun the animal with a blow from a mallet or an axe, and then slit its throat with a knife. The blood was collected and sprinkled on the altar. It was a messy, visceral, and very public affair. This wasn't hidden away. It was a community event. But the Romans didn't just kill the animal and leave it. What happened next was crucial. A priest, known as a haruspex, would inspect the animal's internal organs, especially the liver. The liver was considered a microcosm of the universe, a divine roadmap. The haruspex would look for any abnormalities, discolorations, unusual shapes, or missing parts. A healthy, perfect liver meant the gods accepted the sacrifice and the future was favorable. An abnormal liver could spell disaster. Imagine the tension as an entire city or an entire army waited for the verdict from a sheep's liver. The fate of an empire could literally hang on the appearance of an organ. After the inspection, the organs were cooked and offered to the god by being burned on the altar fire. The rising smoke was seen as carrying the essence of the offering up to the heavens. What about the rest of the meat? It was cooked and shared in a communal feast. This part is important. The sacrifice wasn't just about appeasing a deity. It was about reinforcing community bonds. By sharing a meal consecrated to a god, the community reaffirmed their shared identity and their relationship with the divine. So, in a way, even this bloody ritual ended in a barbecue. But sometimes animal sacrifices weren't enough. When Rome faced an existential crisis, devastating military defeat, a plague, or a terrifying omen, they turned to far darker rituals. One of the most shocking was human sacrifice. Now, Roman writers themselves were often uncomfortable with this and tried to distance their civilized society from the practice, often pinning it on their barbaric enemies like the Gauls or Carthaginians. But the evidence, both archaeological and historical, is undeniable. Rome practiced human sacrifice. It was rare, it was controversial, but it happened. These weren't just random killings, were highly ritualized and reserved for moments of extreme national peril. One of the most well-documented instances occurred after the catastrophic Roman defeat at the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC, where Hannibal's Carthaginian army annihilated a massive Roman force. Panic gripped the city. The Sibylline books, a collection of prophecies consulted in times of crisis, were read. Their advice was horrifying. To appease the angry gods, the Romans were to perform a live burial of two couples, one Greek and one Gallic, in the Forum Boarium, the cattle market. A man and a woman from each group were buried alive in a stone vault, left to die in the darkness beneath the city. The Romans believed this act of sacrificing foreign enemies on Roman soil would purify the state and turn the tide of the war. It was a desperate, brutal act of state-sanctioned murder, performed to restore divine order, and it wasn't a one-time thing. This specific ritual was performed on several occasions throughout Roman history, when the Republic felt its very existence was on the line. Another disturbing practice was the divatio, where a general in a desperate battle could vow to sacrifice himself and the enemy army to the gods of the underworld. The general would perform a specific ritual, dress in special robes, and then charge headlong into the enemy ranks, seeking death. By doing so, he was believed to be trading his life for a Roman victory. The historian Livy describes how Publius Decius Mus did this at the Battle of Viserys in 340 BC by dedicating himself and the enemy to the chthonic gods. He essentially cursed the opposing army and secured a win for Rome. It was the ultimate sacrifice, turning a commander into a weapon of divine wrath. And then there were the Vestal Virgins, the priestesses who tended the sacred flame of Vesta, the goddess of the hearth. Their purity was paramount and directly linked to the security of Rome itself. If a Vestal broke her vow of chastity, it was considered a catastrophic religious pollution that endangered the entire state. The punishment was horrific. The guilty Vestal was stripped of her titles, dressed in funeral clothes, and carried through the city in a closed litter, as if she were already dead. She was then taken to a special underground chamber, given a small amount of food and water, and sealed inside to die. Technically, her blood wasn't shed, thus avoiding the taboo of directly killing a consecrated priestess. But it was a slow, terrifying death sentence, a live burial designed to appease an offended goddess and cleanse the city of a terrible stain. Beyond official state rituals, the world of Roman magic and curses was soaked in blood and fear. People would create curse tablets, thin sheets of lead inscribed with a person's name and a message to the underworld gods, asking for them to be harmed. These tablets would be pierced with a nail symbolically fixing the curse and then deposited in places believed to be close to the underworld, like graves, wells, or springs. Sometimes these curses were intensified with what archaeologists call voodoo dolls, small effigies of the target, often bound or pierced with pins to inflict sympathetic pain or paralysis. The language on these tablets is chilling, calling upon gods like Pluto and Proserpina to twist the limbs, destroy the mind, and extinguish the spirit of their enemies. This was the dark underbelly of Roman spirituality, where personal hatreds were channeled through terrifying appeals to the gods of death. Why was their religion so entwined with blood and fear? It reflects a worldview where the gods were not just benevolent protectors, but also powerful, capricious forces that had to be constantly managed and appeased. The universe was a dangerous place, and divine favor was not a given. It had to be earned, often through a tangible, costly transaction. Blood was seen as the ultimate life force, the most potent offering one could make. When Rome was in peril, its leaders were willing to pay the ultimate price, an enemy, or even their own, to restore balance and secure their survival. The grandeur of the Colosseum and the philosophy of Seneca existed alongside a primal fear of the unknown and a belief that the gods were always watching, always hungry. The gleaming marble of the temples often hid the dark stains of the altars. Thank you for watching. If you found this journey into the dark side of Rome fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden corners of history. See you next time.